G'day reefers and welcome to Gallery Aquatica TV. I'm Anya and today we're here at our house to check out my super simple Softie setup. Now we're not just checking it out, we are here to talk about the upgrade. You might remember the last time we were here, it was over a year ago. We were talking about trying to work on Cameron to convince him to get a larger aquarium for me. Well, it's happening. So today, we're going to talk about all the things you need to consider to ensure a smooth transfer when you're upgrading your aquarium. So moving your reef from a smaller tank into a bigger one is by far one of the greatest achievements in our reefing hobby. As you can see, my coral has certainly grown since the last visit, and there really isn't a lot of space left on the rock work. Moving to a larger tank will allow me to have more space, more corals, possibly some more fish, and of course have more stability with the greater volume. Now, moving a tank across to a new one, it's not really as simple as just filling up a tank and putting things in. You really want to get yourself a little bit of a plan together, and especially in cases like mine where I've got a fair bit of time available, you can really be a bit more strategic about it. So let's think about the considerations necessary to do this in the best way possible. So the first thing I think is important to consider is pest identification and eradication. A new tank is an opportunity, it's like a clean slate, you know? So I think it's important to embrace this moment and remove everything that you do not want to transfer into your new setup. So you would really be able to remove things like flatworms, maybe bristleworms, brittle starfish. On the way in, you can dip your corals. However, what I'm really focused on with my setup are the things that won't come off in coral dip. Now we're talking Aptasia, we're talking vermitid snails and Majano anemones. The number one problem I think I have here in the way of pests are Aptasia. They have surrounded up here around the light. I can see them around here in the rock work, and they're actually in a really good position to use a treatment such as Aptasia X from Red Sea. So that's what we're gonna do. I'll go around and I'll kill as many Aptasia as I can, and I'll wait for those to die and then see how I go in a few days, and I'll get the next set, which tend to kind of, like when you remove some, it tends to give rise to these little ones that you didn't know you had because suddenly they've got more space. So Aptasia X, my biggest tips for that is shake the syringe in between goes and make sure that that solution is homogeneous. It settles out very quickly. And I often see people saying this kind of product doesn't work for them. I really believe it's a user error. Sorry, no offense. I just think you need to uptake the syringe, give it a really good shake, and then go one in and then cover and smother the Aptasia. This will also work for Majano anemones. And I actually think I've got one or two in amongst the coral that's probably come in from the wild. So we're going to take a little bit of extra time to just use the Aptasia X and try and eliminate as many of these as possible. The next pest you can see if you look really closely in my tank are the vermitid snails. Now what began as maybe one or two has unfortunately for me increased to quite a few of them all around the bases of the corals and around the rock work. So for that, my best advice is going to be snip them out, and make sure you snip them out all the way at the base, not just the tube, because that snail can really go down really deep into the base of that skeleton. And I can see one here, here, here. One good tip about locating your vermitids is to use a powdered coral food. I use this Vitalis soft coral food, and you can use that to sprinkle through the tank, and then you can really see the webs. Now, I am aware that vermitid webs are not exactly going to kill octocorals. However, they do annoy them. I can see sometimes when they're tangled up in the tentacles, and I don't like it. And if I've got this opportunity to try and remove as much as possible before the new setup, I'm certainly going to take that chance. The last pest that I would like to remove from this tank are the bristleworms. Now, I understand this is contentious, particularly you guys over in America who say the bristleworms are of benefit. However, personally, I don't like them. I know they eat organic matter. However, I think there are far better solutions that do not sting you and do not hurt your fish. And I've seen a couple of really big ones getting around here at night. So the best way to do this is a bristleworm resort. We have a few different sizes of these available, and we find fresh prawn to be the best possible bait. Now, bristleworms are going to be more active at night. So at night, before I go to sleep, a couple of times a week, I'm gonna just put a piece of prawn head in the cavity here in the center. These have been created with a little maze where the worm comes in, enjoys its fresh little seafood smorgasbord, and hopefully is so lazy it doesn't want to leave again. And then in the morning when I wake up, I'll be taking this trap out and evacuating the unwanted bristleworms. So the second most important thing to do is deal with nuisance algae. You don't want to be putting in pest algae into your brand new setup, that's for sure. So if you've got a whole rock covered, let's say bryopsis or even green hair algae, I think you could really consider just swapping that rock over. You know, it's not going to hurt to have 1 or 2 bits of new scape go in the tank, and you're probably going to be putting in new rock work anyway. If you had something like bryopsis, you could use fluconazole. However, in my case, I don't have a lot of nuisance algae, likely because I've got about 50 snails in here. But what I do have is bubble algae. And Cameron would say it's not so bad, but it's all I can see, you know? So I definitely want it gone. I definitely do not want to introduce it into my new tank. The way that we like to treat it is Continuum Clean Equation M. The treatment goes for 14 days. It has a different dose every day. So we always suggest to write it all out on a piece of paper and tick it off every day as you use it. And, you know, as always, read the instructions really, really well. I'm going to start this bubble algae treatment today, which should mean in about 2 weeks, my tank will be completely free of bubble algae. One thing we do like to do during the course of this treatment is remove Chaetomorpha from the refugium and any special macroalgae that you might be loving in your tank. I'm not going to take out my mangrove. I'm not too sure how that's going to go. I guess we'll see. I always really like to pop the bubble algae during the treatment. Usually in about day 7 to 11 is when you start to see it just disappearing. But I find it doesn't really work as well in the areas of low flow. And I've always kind of thought that this is because of the decreased contact time that the product may have with the bubbles in the low flow areas. So if you do have bubble algae in cracks and crevices or under your scape, I'd probably suggest to manually pop them about halfway through the treatment, and you'll probably find it's never going to come back again. Number 3, evaluate your existing community. So upgrading your tank is going to give you this, opportunity to kind of reset if you need to or if you want to. This is obviously a time that you can permanently remove a fish that you don't enjoy, something that's being a bit aggressive or something that's growing a bit too large, or a coral that's too large. Most people would probably tackle something like an overgrown leather coral by fragging it. I really enjoy the size that my cyclophytons have grown to. I think it really gives a nice sense of scale, and it's that kind of octocoral forest look that I was really going for. However, when I have guests that come over here, they're like, whoa, you've got a lot of coral. So it actually would be quite nice to start again with really small pieces and watch them grow. One thing that I will really need to tackle in here is removing some of the invasive corals. Now, those Sakura Sunrise zoanthids, I never even added them. I don't know how they got in here. They have completely swallowed up my zoanthid magnet rock up the back there. I swear I had like 8 different types of zoas initially. Meanwhile now, it's all just Sakura Sunrise. And not only that, they've spread. I've seen them down here. I can see them down here. I've got a little baby collector urchin that has enjoyed, spreading those. So I really don't want Sakura Sunrise in my new tank, and I'm going to do everything I can to remove those. I think long term, the new community that I want in the new tank, I want to feature Rhodactis. It's definitely a genus of coral that is up there with my favorites. And although I have them in the stash tank at work, I'd really like to have a nice feature rock of Rhodactis, possibly like all the bounce morphs in my tank. And I want to create a bommy for all these different tubipora. Organ pipe corals have always fascinated me, how there's just one species, but so much diversity. Some of them have fused petals, some of them have very hairy kind of filamentous tips on their tentacles. I like the different colors. I love how fast they grow. So I think one of the first things I'll be doing with the new tank is getting a nice rock and mounting all these different tubipora to it to create the perfect kind of bommy for organ pipes. The fourth thing to do is pre-seeded biological media. Now, of course, I'm going to just drop in my 2 scapes into the new tank and put in the existing media that I have already. But because time is on my side, and I've got plenty of it, I think the best thing to do is add some brand new media and allow the good bacteria to transfer off my existing media onto the new stuff. That way, we're going to hopefully avoid that new tank syndrome experience, which often occurs when you move tanks or when you upgrade a tank. We've got here the Max Spect Nanotech Bioballs, and I'm going to just put it here in my sump. Right here next to the return. And it's about as simple as that. So lastly, there are a few final considerations to think about. Do you want to add another rockscape? If you do, you could use this time to buy your rock and build your scape out of water so that it's the absolute perfect look for your new setup. Another thing you would want to consider is your equipment upgrades. A bigger tank tends to need more stuff, so you're probably going to want to save some money. Currently, in my example, I'm going to add a reef mat. I'm really excited about this because I'm really anti-filter sock, and I think that this will make a big difference to the organics. And if we can sort that out, it's almost like it's a precursor for the algae, and hopefully then I'm not going to be fueling the algae because my filtration will be better. Another thing that I'm saving up for right now is an ATO. Currently with the super simple Softie setup, we're manually adding RO every couple of days, and I'm over it. Hopefully with the new setup, we're going to have an ATO and it's going to work perfectly without any kind of interference from us. And finally, when it actually comes to transfer day, it's important to have a really good plan prepared. Now, you may need to get some friends to help. You're going to need all the gear, the buckets, the tubs, maybe a trolley, some hoses, extra seawater. It's all got to be, everything's got to be ready to go on the right day. You don't want to be stressing about bits and pieces or going over to the hardware store to get something you might have forgotten. So write a list and get it sorted. Above all, patience is key. Don't rush, don't stress, and allow enough time for acclimation, and everything's going to go just fine. So upgrading to a larger reef aquarium is more than just upgrading the size. It's a chance to refine your reefing practices. It's a chance to look at community balance, remove your nuisance pests, and get rid of horrible algae. Once you reach that biological stability, you've really covered all the bases for a successful transfer into a new setup. What are your thoughts about my super simple Softie setup upgrade? I'd love it if you could leave me a comment below and, let me know if you've got any extra tips. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Gallery Aquatica TV. I'm Anya, and happy reefing.